Hello, I often see people with fairly large programs in Symbolics, what we refer to as calculated fields in OpenInsight. And getting that code into the Symbolic isn't the most graceful of things in OpenInsight, and debugging it gets even more difficult. And I was talking to Bob Carton about this the other day, and he gave me the most amazing solution to this problem. And I'm going to cover that in this video after these short words. Hello, this is Martin and welcome to this next video in my series in which I am getting started with OpenInsight 10. And this video is not going to follow the normal path. We've been working with a clinic application, and in this one I'm actually using a different application. This is something that I'm just working on for myself. It's a side project, and I had an issue with a symbolic, a calculated field in OpenInsight, where I needed to debug it. Now I've added in a couple of symbolics here. One is member days, which is the new one, and member days 1, which is the old one. So this is the old code. If I just open up the editor here, you'll see that this is a very simple editor, almost like Notepad, where you are putting your code in. There's a little bit of colorization, but otherwise not an awful lot. There's no coding tools to assist you. And if you've got a long program, this can be quite a clumsy sort of interface to work in. It's okay for what it does, but there are better ways. But until yesterday, this is the way that I was doing my calculated columns. So if we were to introduce a bug, so we're going to return val day instead of val days. So we'll just do an OK there, and we will save the table. We'll then test run the form, and we'll return a record so that we hit that calculated column, and immediately we get back an ENG 0010 member days 1 line 1 variable has not been assigned a value, but we don't actually have any variables documented in here. We've got a call stack but no other information. So normally you would go back and think, okay, that's a return 0 or return 1 that's missing. Well, in a calculated column, we don't have a return 0 or return 1. Now the and is incorrect, so if we were to set that back, then this will now work. But if we then wanted to put a debugger in here, for instance, let's say we wanted to make sure that val days was being set correctly. So if I do an OK to that, and we'll do a save, and we'll do a test run again. So now we're forcing a debug, whereas before the system was producing the issue and dropping us to the debugger. Now we've asked it to drop to the debugger so that we can see what that variable is. But there's no local variables listed in here, because this smaller interface for calculated columns doesn't support that sort of thing. So I was thinking, how on earth do I debug this code then? And I was talking to Bob Carton, and for OpenInsight 10, he's got a nice little fix for this. Now, one of the things I will do before I forget is I'm going to just delete that row because I don't need that anymore. And the fix, or the new solution, it's not even a fix, the new solution I have in member days. So if we open up the formula for member days, you'll see now that it is just simply @ands equals function MP players controller. So where on earth did that come from? Well, that is a new function that has been created by me with Bob's help within OpenInsight. Now I'm using the store procedure editor, so I have all of the normal tools available to me. I can find labels, I can find inserts, I can format the code, I can change the case, I can shift right, shift left, I can search for things. This is a much nicer interface to be working in. And the other thing that we can do, remember, is under source code and source code templates, you can create your own code template for a window controller. And that's what I've done. So I won't actually look at that one. We'll just look at the code that we are using. So it's a function, and normally you would have the same window name, so MP players, and then I've put underscore controller at the end to differentiate this as the controller program for that particular window. We're then passing in some methods and bits and pieces, and then we need a couple of declarations. So the first declaration is a function, and it's get current symbolic. Now, when you're running in 10.04 and onwards, that should be RTI underscore get current symbolic. The reason mine isn't RTI underscore is because I'm running here in 10.03, but it's 10.03 and a bit. I've got a few other little bits and pieces that have been dropped in here, and this get current symbolic isn't finished published code. This is pre-release code that I'm working with, and when it's finally released, it should be RTI underscore, but you get the idea. So we declare the function. We'll then insert logical, used for most things, so I've actually got both of those in my code template, so they're automatically dropped in. We then have the comment section for our program, very useful, and obviously the update history, again very, very useful. We then need to ascertain which symbolic we're working with, which calculated column we're working with, and this little block of code does that. And again, that's standard and static for this particular program, so again that code forms part of my template. Then we get into the case statements. So the case statement is going to pick up the method that has been passed backwards. So we're actually working on the symbolic member days down here, and so in our program we are calling member days, and then if member days has been passed in, we're going to go sub member days, and then in here we have the code that we're going to run. Now I haven't got @ands in here because obviously that's not supported in this particular tool, so the code is slightly different, but it's effectively the same. So we're going to pass in the days, and then obviously for a good case statement we have otherwise. So if the method doesn't match, then we'll drop to the bad code and it will send a message, etc. Now this is a much nicer interface for managing your symbolic code. It's a familiar environment for those of you that are working with commuter modules, and it's just much easier, faster, and so much more efficient than trying to mess around with the code in here and debug the code, in particular if you've got a lot of code in here that you're working with. Now the other thing as well is in here is now what we can do is simply copy and paste this formula into all of the other calculated columns for the window, because they're all going to reference our new store procedure. And I think that's a really cracking and really nice way of working with symbolic code within OpenInsight 10. And I'd like to thank Bob Carton for sharing this information with me, and I hope that you will find that to be very useful. I'll see you in the next video coming very soon. Thank you very much for your time today. Goodbye.